So the secrets to prop trading, are there any actual secrets? And how can you really go about implementing them in your own trading? So let's talk about it. Well, number one is going to be talking about eval accounts. First things first, eval accounts are not funded accounts. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, there's this trend of people posting their certificates, of people, talking about certificates, people talking about passing, getting happy about passing, and the biggest issue is people trading their eval accounts like they're funded accounts. Now you might be asking yourself, well, what is the problem with this? Why is this a problem? Is there anything wrong with this? And the reason is simply because, think about this logically. If you were to take $500 and put it into your brokerage account, are you gonna celebrate that? Not really, right? And that's exactly what's happening when you pass an eval account. When you pass an eval account on a funded account, all you're doing is you're allocating money to yourself because you passed the challenge. So the journey has just begun. You haven't really accomplished anything. And I don't say this to put anyone down. I simply say this because people tend to fail during their funded accounts simply because they've had this sense of accomplishment during their eval accounts. Now let's look at the process of what happens when you pass an eval account. You're trading with a firm, you pass the account, the market closer or whatever, you get a certificate in your email. The first thing that happens when people get a certificate is they're happy. They post it places, whether it's in their Discord, to their mentor, post on their socials, whatever. People post and talk about these certificates like there's some sense of accomplishment. They're the equivalent to participation trophies. They're meant to make people feel good. Now, I don't know if this is intentional, but if it is intentional, it's a very, very smart thing from prop firms because it gives people this dopamine rush and the sense of accomplishment, which is really detrimental because now you feel like you've achieved something. So when you go to the next stage of your funded accounts, you're still in that rush of, oh my God, I've already done so good, I've done so good, I've done so good. And you don't realize you've just begun and the actual work has just started. So it's very important for you guys to remember the fact that, hey, these are not funded accounts, they're not meant to be traded like them, and they're not meant to be celebrated like them. The other thing to talk about is when I say don't trade them like funded accounts, I'm not saying you have to gamble the account in one day. What I'm trying to tell you guys is that there's a opportunity cost here. Trading is all about opportunity. Now, sometimes people get really mad because they catch these great trades on their eval accounts and they're like, oh my God, I could have made actual money on my funded accounts. And the thing is, the more days you trade on your eval account, the more potential opportunities you're missing on your funded account. And looking at the risk of these eval accounts, it's not generally much. You can get an eval account nowadays for like, $80. So the only real risk here is time. I would personally rather fail a $80 eval account a couple times than waste a week or 2 weeks passing it. Because within that week or 2 weeks, I can get so many good trades on a potential funded account and easily cover no matter how many eval accounts I might blow in the process of that. So prioritizing passing that eval account as quick as possible is really gonna help you guys. So really focus on that. Now, I understand everyone's situation is going to be different. Some people are gonna have financial constraints, but the honest reality is that trading has never been this cheap to get into. So if you're at this point where, $80 also is a very big thing to think about, I don't mean this in a rude way at all, but it might be better for you to wait on it because if you're trading an $80 account with a lot of psychological stress, once you pass an account, it's only going to get worse. And then once you potentially get to a live account in the future, it's just going to be way too much stress for you to handle. So I highly recommend if, blowing one eval account is too much financial stress on you, wait until it isn't so you can properly maximize the use of these. So talking about funded accounts, just like I said, eval accounts aren't funded accounts. Funded accounts also aren't live accounts. And now when I say live accounts, this can be anything. This could be an account you get after passing the funded stage and getting real money paid out from your broker, from your prop firm into a brokerage where you trade on, still having that 90-10 split. Or it could be your own money you put into a brokerage account. The main reason it's different from a funded account is because your money into that account is your onset risk. Whether the firm puts 10K into account or you put 10K into an account, the risk there is 10K that you have to lose. On a funded account, your true risk is only what you spent buying that eval. Now, the whole reason we buy these evals and buy these funded accounts is because we're trying to gain leverage for cheaper. So when I buy an $80 eval account, I'll take the example of the My Funded Future Starter account. Simply using this one as an example because I've experienced trading it, the 50K account is $80 and you can make $1,200 a week on it for several weeks and then move to a live account. So the risk here is super low. The drawdown on the account is $2,500. So you're paying $80 to have $2,500 to trade with. So the whole purpose of buying this account is to trade aggressively on it in order to get a good ROI on the money you spent. That's really it. Now, the other part you have to look at on these funded accounts is going to be how to game the system. Now, your goal is not to scam prop firms. You're not in the space to scam prop firms. There's going to be fine print. There's going to be rules in place. You can't scam them, but you can play the game correctly. Every prop firm has different rules. Again, right now, I'm going to give the example of my funded futures simply because I've experience with them. On these 50K starter accounts, once you pass that eval phase, you have a consistency rule on your funded account of 40%. What this means is your biggest day can't be more than 40% of your overall profits. Now, keeping that in mind, we have to be smart about that because our goal is not to make a lot of money in one day and then hopefully slowly get to that 40% mark. Through the whole period of time, we want to make sure that we're never stressed with not meeting that 40% consistency rule. Because the minute we get too past that, our brain's going to be like, oh my God, this rule is messing up my trading, blah, blah, blah. Why is this rule in the place here? Well, you already knew that rule was going to be there when you bought the account. So there's nothing to worry about here now. Like, you can't change the fact that that's a rule. What you can change is how you take your approach to it. So from the start, you should be expecting, okay, there's a 40% rule here. How do I make sure I'm not making too much, but I'm also not cutting myself short? Go for a daily goal. And the other cool thing is on these accounts, there's a weekly cap on your profits. So what that tells us is there's no reason to make extra money because it's not like you can get it. So I'm not saying make $1,200 your first week and that's it, because obviously when you withdraw, you will still want to have money to trade with, but you also don't have to aim for 2K a day when the max you can get in a week from these accounts is 1,200. Maybe go for, 500 to 1,000 a day. That way, when you withdraw at the end of the week, you still have money to trade with, and every single week this buffer is going to stack. And by the time you get to this final week before your live account, well, you just have to, trade for a couple $100 a day and you can get to your live account. So that's a strategy you can use to really gamify this whole system, because the reality is this is not something, we're doing with bad intent. The same way they have rules in place the reality is make people fail, you also have mental rules in place to pass these accounts, and you have to gamify the system completely. My outlook is going to be simply that, hey, if I have a 40% consistency rule in place, and I know the reality is that I'm gonna overmake the money some days, I'm gonna go for a small goal every single day, and that's gonna keep stacking up every single week. So every week it's gonna become easier to get to that point of withdrawing that $1,200. Near the last 2 weeks, it's gonna become so easy that you can make just a minimum amount of $100 or $200 that qualify for a green day. You can get your money, and all that buffer built up from those previous weeks, you can withdraw that as your payout. So that's a very, very cool strategy to look into when trading these accounts. Now, again, every firm is gonna have a different, approach to their rules and stuff like that. But the main important part is before you start it, have a game plan laid out. Account for potential red days, account for, big green days, small green days. A lot of people, when they see like, oh, I can make this much in, 5 green days, never account for any red days. Red days will happen. And if your planning doesn't account for that, you're gonna get screwed. Moving on from that, the thing I wanna talk about, the final thing, is going to be a consistent system. What I mean by this is none of this matters if you don't have a consistent system, because if you don't trade profitably, you're not gonna make money at the end of the day. And I think we've finally come to a realization as a community in trading that consistency in your strategy matters, to the point where people have slowly stopped strategy hopping as much as they used to in the past. They've definitely declined a lot now. But what that was also happening is people also stick to strategies that aren't working. Just because you're consistent with something doesn't mean it's gonna work if it's something that, statistically doesn't work. So you have to also use something that actually works. And that kind of leads into my main point, being that data gathering is very, very important. Now, I'm gonna make a whole video on journaling too in the future, but definitely something to look into is going to be journaling. And number 2 is going to be the fact that if you're not gathering data yourself, you need to gather that data from somebody else. And this can be a mentor, this can be a community, anything you can get data from. Because the reality is, any skill set you want to learn, you would be dumb to want to do it completely alone without taking advantage of the fact that someone else has already failed at this, succeeded at this, and you can take that from them. And this has nothing to do with trading. This has to do with any skill set you're trying to learn. There's already someone out there who's made all the mistakes that you might make, and they can explain that mistake to you in one line, and it would take you 1 year to learn that mistake yourself and rectify it. So please guys, make sure that you're taking advantage of people who've already gone through all of this and they can give you advice. I'm doing this right now for you guys. You know, if I knew half of this stuff when I first started prop accounts, I would have saved myself a lot of money on evals, and trust me, it would have made a massive difference. So keep that in mind. Now, I have broken down my month of August on YouTube. It's probably going to be a video somewhere over here if you guys want to watch it, but just gives you an idea of my system and the way I trade. And if that resonates with you guys, feel free to kind of reach out and we can talk about it. But my main point has to be that look for a consistent system that's going to work for you, and don't jump away from it, whether it's one day that's bad, or it's 1 week that bad, whether it's like 1 month that's bad. If you have enough data on it, those small things won't hinder you. I had an amazing August, and I'm kind of not enjoying the market right now. And the reality is because the range in the market's so small right now, that's not of much interest to me. And I'm not gonna change my strategy off of this 1 month, especially on a month that the market's just not enjoyable across the board to people. So that confidence only comes from when you have a lot of data to kind of look past. So with that being said, my final thoughts for you guys are simply going to be that you have to learn to gamify the system. Trading these prop accounts is not trading your own money, and you have to really be in sync with that. Blow a couple evals, it's fine. Blowing accounts is completely fine in the prop space, and the reason for that is simply because the whole purpose of us spending, you know, the small amount of money to gain this massive drawdown is to trade aggressively. Hey, if I wanted to buy a 150K account that has $4,500 drawdown and trade it safely, I will just use my own money, not have to deal with the challenge BS, and keep 100% of the split. The whole reason I'm going through this whole thing is to trade it aggressively and potentially make more money than I would trading $4,500 of my own. So keep that in mind. It's okay to fail these accounts, blow accounts, because the net goal is to simply make an ROI on the money you're spending. Same way when you buy a $100 SPY contract, your goal is to make, 50%, 100% on that. Same way when you spend $80 on an eval account, your goal is just to make more than $80. And over time, you can figure out the kinks and make more than that, right? So I'm gonna leave you guys on that and end with the fact of the only certificate in props you wanna celebrate is going to be your payout certificate. Hope you guys enjoyed. Any questions, always guys, drop them below, and I'll see you guys next time.